Hey, this is Scott Mason with Scott Mason LLC. And if you really want to learn how to level up your life, you should be listening to the Time to Shine Today podcast with my good friend, Scott Ferguson.
Time to Shine Today podcast Varsity Squad. It is Scott Ferguson, and we're going to take a journey on the Purpose Highway with my really good friend, Scott Mason. Scott is a fantastic speaker. He's a motivator. Every time I talk to him or associate with him or hear people talk about him, it rings true. He's just fantastic. So you're going to want to take notes here, man. He's going to talk about connecting to your providential purpose. He's going to talk about really connecting and how to connect with everybody that you come in contact with. So without further ado, let's take that journey on the Purpose Highway with my really good friend, Scott Mason. Let's level up. Time to Shine Today podcast Varsity Squad. This is Scott Ferguson, and I got my boy. We run a very parallel life. We're both biracial. We're both adopted. We were both born outside the United States of America, and we are both speakers, although he's probably a better speaker than I am. And we're going to kind of get into my boy speaker, Scott Mason. And like I kind of mentioned a second ago, Scott was raised by two working class Kansans in Kansas, the state in here in the United States. And they were African-American and they raised him. But he lived a little bit of a country life playing with crawdads, and he really wasn't expected to make much for himself, but this guy is a rock star speaker, rock star podcaster. After you listen to this show, you must check out the Purpose Highway podcast. I just listened to one with, I believe his name is Julio. He rocked the mic, and Scott rocks the mic as well. You're going to see a lot of energy here, and he attended Columbia Law School, then worked in New York City for nearly 20 years before becoming an executive for a large social services nonprofit, and from there became co-owner of a Brooklyn-based printing company. He now lives the life of his dreams as a business and leadership mentor and speaker, sharing his message about resilience, personal transformation, and social ethics to all who will listen. Now we have another squad that's going to listen to my boy, Scott Mason. So Scott, come on, introduce yourself to the Time to Shine Today Varsity Squad. But first, what's your favorite color and why?
Deep blue. And I like deep blue because it's rich. You can look at it a long time, and it's embedded in the word itself. Depth.
Depth, baby. Love it. I love it. And you are full of the depth, my man. So let's get to the origins, man. Like a little bit, like we went over some of your childhood, but I want to see how some of that childhood kind of rolled in to where you're at now and how that helped you level up to really reaching out and touching people's lives in a positive, thriving manner.
There are so many ways that I could answer that question, but I'll actually start with the earliest point of transformation. My mom worked in a dog food factory. My dad worked for the highway patrol in Kansas. With hard work and not a little bit of luck, ended up, as you mentioned earlier, going to Columbia Law School. Mm-hmm. I was surrounded by people whose parents were high-level professors, fancy Wall Street lawyers, judges, big-time business people. I didn't know people like that growing up in Kansas, especially when your mom works in the dog food factory. And so one of the best things that happened because of that, I had to learn to communicate at the top of the food chain all the way down. So I would walk down the halls and talk to these fancy schmancy people and then hang out with the cafeteria workers and janitors. And that's one of the big sources of resilience that I have, because I have connections and abilities to relate to people all across the dial.
I'm going to say, dude, you relate to everybody. And dude, you and I are just two people in two separate bodies. I do the exact same thing because where I was raised was kind of white boy suburbia with, a lot of money on one side of the tracks, literally. And my dad worked for General Motors on the line.
Yeah.
Right. And he made good money, but we never lived that life. So luckily I was good at sports, so I could kind of walk on the other side of the tracks and be noticed. But like you said, I relate to everybody. And that's why you're an awesome speaker and an awesome coach. So let's get into the origins, though, of your speaking and coaching, Scott.
Yeah. So with regards to the speaking, I actually have heard my whole life that the presentation skills that I have could effectively communicate points that I might want to make and to support whatever cause it is that I was behind, even if it was just whatever my employer wanted me to present in front of a group of my colleagues. It wasn't until later in my career when I began to understand and separate social expectations about what my profession should be from what I was called to be as a human being, that I began to really look inside and try and connect with what I felt my true gifts were. And
Right.
the one thing that I kept coming back to over and over, and that other people came back to me over and over and over, was the ability to speak, to be a voice for something. And as I began to figure out how I could be of service to this world, the use of that voice began to be apparent to me as the superpower that I could use to be out there, make this world a better place.
Were you scared when you started to speak?
No.
I didn't think you were, man. It's like there's certain people out there that you get ramped up and you get ready to go, but I don't think that you were ever too afraid to get out there and whatnot. So that's awesome. So do you work with individuals one-on-one?
I actually have a group of small business owners in particular that I work with and provide leadership mentorship to, as well as strategic and operational guidance. I have a massive operational management background. I have, it's very diverse. That combined with the legal experience puts me in a position where I can leverage those skills to help organizations that want to grow and scale successfully. And those clients are my lifeblood, and I love them all.
Love that. So grow and scale. So let's talk about you're bringing somebody into your group, right? And they're in the discovery period and whatnot, or maybe even people in your group, Scotty. Is there any secret sauce that you might use to help them find their blind spots?
Well, some of them are the basic tools to, sort of figure out what your aspirations are and what your strategy is for your company and to what extent you're aligned or not. But one thing that I strongly believe is looking at two things. First of all, what are the emergency problems? The emergency problems are the gateways that we can walk through together to figure out what those blind spots are. They're inevitably have become emergencies because of a blind spot that's been uncured. So diving in regularly on emergency situations opens the door to the leadership challenges,
Yes.
and the leadership challenges ultimately drive everything. The other thing too is to figure out what your purpose is as an entrepreneur. If what you're doing is not aligned to that purpose, a blind spot either with regards to the business itself or your place as the founder and CEO of that business is in play. And we need to figure out how and why and what we can do about it.
So with your speaking, what do you think then makes a great speaker, a great communicator?
Two things. First of all, the willingness to connect to emotion, fearlessness about it. Number two, respect for and understanding of the audience. It's not about you as a speaker. You know this as a podcaster who just in this episode alone is demonstrating it. You understand you can't sit there and just drone on and on. You have an obligation to that audience to not only impart information, but to keep them awake so that they can hear it.
Is freaking awesome, man. Those two are just amazing. They resonate across my whole avatar of the people that I want listening to here. And then the people that I'm trying to attract into it. But like getting on stage is a whole different. You've got to do that research and find out, the emotions of the audience, what they're expecting, right? And then they respect and understand them as well, like you said. So have you ever failed while you're on stage and not connect?
Learning how to read an audience is another skill, particularly in live settings. That has not happened to me live. However, there have been situations. There was a situation where I did a virtual presentation. I put my heart and soul into it. I heard from some people after the fact that they were riveted, that it was powerful, they were deeply affected. But the man who had brought me there, who perhaps was the most important person of all, sat there stone-faced the whole time and made it pretty clear that this was not something that he enjoyed. I had to depersonalize it. You know, because you have a very specific and strong style. We cannot and do not aspire to appeal to everyone. We have to be ourselves. And that's what ultimately works, even if these failings happen along the way.
Right. Yeah, I have had that where I was actually asked to speak at an introvert conference because they wanted the exact opposite. And it was like I had everybody rolling, but the person that brought me there, because they wanted to have a different perspective. I just stayed authentic. You know what I'm saying? Which in retrospect, I probably should have added in like a lot of what the tips you just offered to be able to connect with emotion and stuff like that. I just went in guns blazing. It was a lesson learned for me, man. So then when you're starting to kind of work with these businesses and help them leverage and level up, is there any good question, Scotty, that you wish they would ask you but never do?
Yeah. What exactly does mentorship mean to you, Scott? Because that's important for us to understand to figure out whether we are a personality match. I have a lot of substantive knowledge. They're seeking it. But if our styles can't work together, there's going to be a problem. And I will try and raise that up front with the individual, but sometimes it may or may not come up, or they may commit quickly or whatever. And none of us are perfect. We all forget things sometimes. Absolutely. That is what I wish they would ask.
Yeah, in mentorship, man, you open the door to that. How important is mentoring to you?
Profoundly.
Yeah.
I was once told by a boss when I worked for city government, I was frustrated because I could not get one. He said, Scott, you will never have one. It's not in the cards for you. I was devastated. He said, just your personality, you're not going to attract it.
Right.
But you can become your own mentor. And do you know, Scott, to this day, every year I put together a curriculum of books that I read for myself to self-educate. Follow that stuff, just like a classroom, and constantly act as my own mentor. It means that much.
Right. But you're also paying that forward, aren't you? The stuff that the people that are willing to absorb and listen, you're paying that forward, aren't you, Scott?
Yeah. And I have aggressively sought out people that I see might not have mentors otherwise.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that. Huge, bro. You know, my mentor told me, is like, listen, man, the more you mentor, the more immortal you become. That's why I try to mentor all the time, man. It's like people, you pay that forward, and like someone 10 people down the line because it came from you. You know what I'm saying? And there's people 50, 100 above me that it came from that was told. And that's amazing that you do that, man. I freaking love you said mentoring. So you saw Back to the Future, right? The movie?
Oh, many years ago.
We're in the same age bracket, brother. So I know you did. Let's get in that DeLorean, man, with Marty McFly. Let's go back to that 22-year-old Scott Mason. What kind of knowledge nuggets, that's what we call him here at Time to Shine today. What kind of knowledge nuggets are you dropping on Scott to help him level up, maybe shorten that learning curve and blast through, maybe just a little quicker?
Take off social expectations about what you should be, like an old pair of socks, and throw them away. Be what your calling is. And if you have feeling inside, or if you have an urge or a pull, don't turn that away. Listen to it, lean into it. If you do, the means for you to become that will occur.
And I love it that you said that. Like, I'm hearing time and time again through you in this interview, man, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but be authentic. You know what I'm saying?
Amen.
And I always say, like, and I was taught this by my really good friend Leah Woodford, that, you know, that if you're leaning into it and you get stuck and you get scared, get your asking gear. Start asking for help, man. There's people out there that will show up, right? I mean, that can really help you. That's awesome. So, Scotty, how do you want your dash remembered, man? That little line in between your incarnation date and your expiration date, your life date and death date. How do you want Scott's dash remembered?
He gave love.
Love it. That's enough said.
What is right? Thank you. Keep it brief.
Yeah, brevity is huge, man. You know, it is in a lot of people. So, who has one person that's had the most profound impact on your life?
I would say, actually, an author by the name of Gene Wolfe. He's a brilliant literary sci-fi-ish genius whose books have utterly turned me inside and out. And they are all around the theme of leadership or understanding that who and what social expectations are of you and who and what you think you might be because of those are just illusions. What you are capable of and what you truly can be is beyond imagination.
That reminds me of the book that George McFly wrote at the end of Back to the Future. You can be anything you want to be if you put your mind to it. Remember at the very end, he got his books delivered to him. That's awesome that you said that. You said sci-fi too. So let's go the other way, man. What's the worst, not person, but what's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Actually, when I was finished with college, I was in literature, had a literature degree, and I didn't know what to do with it. I thought about going to law school, which I ultimately did. I wanted to take some time off, though, to be sure that before I invested those hundreds of thousands of dollars, it was what I really wanted to do. And the worst piece of advice, I love the people who gave them to me, and I do not fault them for giving this advice. It was my fault for taking it. So I want to be clear about that. My folks who were from a different generation said, Scott, no, go to law school now. Don't take that time off. You'll get into doing other things and you'll never get that degree. It ended up being the worst piece of advice because I was never happy as a lawyer. And I ended up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars being indentured in debt to that until I was 41. Whereas if I had taken the time to explore and figure out who and what I needed to be in this world, a lot of heartache and hassle wouldn't have happened.
Like you said, lean into that passion, man. Find out what you're passionate about, lean into it, right? Thank you for sharing that, man. That's very transparent. Really appreciate that. So Scotty, what 3 apps on your phone can you not live without?
I will confess to Instagram.
Okay.
I'm not proud about that one.
You're good.
But it's there. And I will also probably refer to a calculator app because I'm bad at doing math in my head and we all need to be on top of our finances.
You can't live without it, right?
And my bank's app.
Okay, very cool. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate it. So what do you think people misunderstand the most about Scott?
That I actually can be quiet sometimes. Do you ever have that misunderstanding?
Dude, I get it all the like, Fergie, are you on like 24/7? No, man. What I love about my girl is she's more introvert and she allows me to just chill at home. You know, that's where I'm most comfortable. But
we are separate, same person, separate bodies. I have that relationship dynamic too.
So what keeps you up at night?
Thinking about what is to come the next day. I am motivated by my mission. So I wake up and I'm always thinking this, that, and the other. What can I have out on social media the next day? Who can be my next guest on my podcast? What can I do to help a client with a problem? What is the subject of a new speech that I'm going to be giving? It's too much.
You live that, man. You live that. That's awesome. So what then, Scotty, is your definition of a life well lived?
A life well lived is one in which, and I'm going to get a little bit spiritual here.
Yeah, man.
But it is one in which you have connected to your providential purpose. You've dived into the river that it has carved for you, that you go with that flow. You're building a better self through it, and you're taking it outwards. You're building a better world.
Yes. That is awesome, man. That is a life well lived in the perfect nutshell. Thank you for saying that. So, and hey, we are back with my man with the Purpose Highway podcast, the rock star speaker, Scott Mason. And we're going to move into our leveling up lightning round, Scott. And you and I could talk 15, 20 minutes, an hour on each one of these questions, but you got 5 seconds with no explanations. You ready to rock?
I'm scared, but yes.
Let's do it. Let's level up. What's the best leveling up advice Scott's ever received?
Go for it.
Yes. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Looking neat and well-groomed.
Yes, I do. You're a very studious, handsome brother. Awesome. So, other than speakerscott.com and timetoshinetoday.com, my shameless plug, what other website does Scott like to go to level up?
Overcomingodds.today.
Boom. Love that. Love it. That'll go in the show notes, squad. All right. So I'm not feeling it. I'm walking around and I'm in my doldrums. You see me in New York City. I didn't reach out to you. You're already mad about that, but you see me on my doldrums, right? Fergie, read this book. What book are you handing me?
The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe.
Awesome. I'm going to put that in the show notes, and I'm literally buying that when we're done. Scott, what's your most commonly used emoji?
Fist bump.
Fist bump. Love it. And don't freaking lie to me right now, okay? All right? Here we go. What age physically would you stay for the rest of your life if you could keep the knowledge you've gained and continue to garner knowledge? What age physically would you stay for the rest of your life?
Believe it or not, I'm happy with where I am.
Okay. All right. I'll still take 32 because I'll tell you what, when I get up in the morning, I feel a lot better then. I can recover a little bit easier. But I'll go with you because you look great because I know your age. I ain't going to say it, but I know it. You look fantastic. Scott, what's your favorite charity organization you'd like to give your time or money to?
Spectrum Designs, which is a t-shirt printing company that by and large employs folks on the autistic spectrum.
Love it, dude. I'm putting that in the show notes.
Please
Spectrum.
do. They deserve it.
Yes. Spectrum. I'm writing it down, guys. Hold on 1 second, everybody. Last question. You can elaborate a little bit on this one, Scott, but what is the best decade of music? 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s?
To me, the best best of those decades, 70s disco.
Right. Disco.
Is there really any question here?
Studio 54, baby.
Like, who was Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Donna Summer? That's what it's all about.
That's it, baby. I love it. I love it. Scotty, how can we find you, man?
Speakerscott.com.
I love that URL, by the way. You locked it in with that. That's awesome.
Grabbed what I could. Thank you. Dude. And then purposehighway.com.
Love it. And you talk a little bit about Purpose Highway, man. I listened to a couple of interviews. You rock it. You rock that mic. So talk just a little bit about that.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate hearing that from you, first of all. Purpose Highway is a space for conversations with people who have connected to their higher purpose to build a better self and a better world. There are people that might have had certain boxes created for them, but are thriving in the circle around it.
Wow. That's awesome. And it's awesome, squad. You got to go to it. I believe that it has a separate URL, purposehighway.com. That's another fantastic URL you locked in there, my man.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that. So Scotty, leave us with one last knowledge nugget you want us to take with us, internalize, and take action on.
When you connect with your providential stream, in other words, when you've connected your skills, experience, with an area of service, you know your purpose, you will go with the flow, and your life will be better than you can imagine.
That is freaking awesome, man. And squad, literally, I got pages of notes, and I hope that you do too, with my really good friend, Scott Mason from speakerscott.com and also purposehighway.com, his podcast. He's someone that can communicate at the top of the food chain down. So it didn't matter if you're a billionaire or a zeroaire. Scotty he can communicate with you, he can converse with you, and he can help you level up. He says that the use of a voice is a superpower, and his voice rocks. You know, if he starts working with people in their blind spot, he finds out what their emergency problems are, and they work to go through those together. And they also help you figure out your purpose and align with it and help you level up. You know, he'll tell you that a great speaker connects with emotion to the audience. He also, secondly, respects and understands his audience. You know, he wants to be a mentor to people. And like we say, Scotty's going to be immortal because the way he's consistently mentoring people. You know, he wants you to take off social expectations on what you should be, throw it away. He wants you to lean into your passion, and he will be remembered as someone who gave love and is motivated by his mission every day, because that actually keeps him up at night. You know, his life well lived would be that you have connected to your providential purpose and to build a better world out of that through your skills and experience and your areas of expertise, and really able to push it through and help others level up. And Scott, you do just that, man. You level up your health, you level up your wealth, you're humble, yet you're driven. I can't wait to collaborate with you in the future and get a Sabara dog there in New York City. Man, I love your guts, brother. Thank you so much for coming on Time to Shine today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, bro. Talk soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Time to Shine Today podcast, proudly brought to you by Sutter & Nugent Real Estate.
Real Estate Excellence, who can be reached at 561-249-7266 and online at www.sutterandnugent.com. If you are a business owner or professional who would like to be interviewed on Time to Shine Today, please visit timetoshinetoday.com/guest. If you like this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. There's a link in the show notes to our website. Also there, you will see our recommended resources. We hope that you will support our show by supporting them. If you like what you've been listening to, it'd be great if you could just give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe while you're at it. I'm your host, Scott Ferguson, and until next time, let's level up. It's our time to shine.